There are very few selected cars that have kept to the idea of which the car was created. Driving enjoyment distilled. Nowadays cars are getting so complicated. Heavy, four-wheel drive, automatics, hybrid systems. The Honda Civic Type R has always been an absolute weapon. Front-wheel drive, manual, high-strung, in this case turbocharged engine. And here in the latest FL5 generation. So in this review I'm going to do an extreme deep dive in the new generation Honda Civic Type R. Gone is the boyish exterior that characterized the previous FK8. Honda received a lot of criticism for the FK8 being too aggressive, too much. So Honda did with the FL5, they toned it down a lot. Made it more mature, more flowy lines, no fake vents really. Everything is much more molded into the body. I'll talk about that molding into the body a little bit later. Underneath it is still the FK8, but a lot of changes have been done. First and foremost, the front here. The opening is bigger to allow for more cooling. Here we find a real air vent, together with an upgraded intercooler to keep the engine cool when you drive this hard. And if we continue to the side here, a lot of the air vents and stuff like that is molded into the body, such as this opening here that extracts the high pressure that forms inside the wheel arches. If we continue back, you see this lower black side skirt and this flap kind of thing, and that controls the air that is flowing over this rear tire. So there's some real aerodynamic trickery here. And as I talked about before, this fender widener part, yes, it is actually widened, is integrated. Before it was more slapped on, which disturbed the airflow. So, you know, a lot of talks about aerodynamics with this FL5. And talking about aerodynamics, you have that spoiler. And I think that is the only part of this new Honda Civic Type R that looks just bolted on. And not in the best way, I must say. Here we have the 2-liter turbocharged engine, quite unchanged, apart from that turbocharger. It's been redesigned a little bit, together with a new map and a new air intake. The exhaust is also a little bit changed. So right now it produces 320 horsepower and 420 Newton meter. A jump, but all the other changes to the chassis, to the suspension and all of that has made this car a little bit heavier than the previous generation as well. Unfortunately, the Civic Type R does not have double wishbone suspension, so the Honda engineers had to do some magic trickery to make this handle the way it's supposed to. One of them is to give this a squared setup with 265 tires both front and rear. This lip on the rim that controls the flexion of the tire. Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires. You can opt out for the Pilot, not the Pilot, but the Cup 2s. So that would be a really serious tire for this type of car. Behind everything you have, you know, the steering knuckle, the suspension fork, all of that, and that has also been changed, upgraded to control the camber, to control the flexion, make it as light as possible. The brakes are not slotted or drilled, they are regular brakes from Brembo, and that is supposed to give, reduce the risk of stress cracks, so to last for longer. The steering of itself has been changed to give more feel, and by adding a new torsion or a stiffer torsion bar. And not only that, the gearbox as well, and we'll get to that when we get into the car. And the gearbox, a manual gearbox. No automatic can be found in the new Honda Civic Type R. They've worked to make it easier to change gear, and they changed the weight of the knob here because they thought they needed to. It definitely feels like a sports car, especially with this red racing seats. You sit very low down. Of course they are adjustable, so you can sit either high up or low down. But the engine of itself, 2-liter turbocharged, to be honest, nothing special. There's in comfort like we're doing right now, there's nothing to really talk about. And to be honest, I'll talk about it later, but I'll talk about it now a little bit. Apart from the high revving nature of the engine, there's nothing special about it. No pops and bangs, no deep throatiness. There's quite uncharacterful. The Honda Civic Type R has always been a driver's car, right? It's a car for people that prioritize driving feel, driving enjoyment above all else. Even in sport mode, which is not the most aggressive setting, the amount of feedback and communication that is being transferred through the seat and the steering wheel is so incredible. It's a front-wheel drive car, and you feel that the front is pulling, and Honda's done everything in their powers to make it stable and to put that 330 horsepower and 420 newton meters effectively through the ground. So let's put it into R plus mode or plus R mode, which is the most aggressive setting, and it's much more stiffer. You can see how much I'm being thrown around, and the steering is much more heavy, but there's so much feedback. And then the turn in, just perfectly placed. Plus R mode, I mean, that's super serious. That's race car or track day setting. It's so incredibly stiff, and compared to the FK8, the FL5 changed with the individual mode, so you can have everything in the most aggressive setting, but you can set the suspension in comfort or even sport. There isn't that much sound. There's actually a lot of sound that's piped into the car. No real cracks and bangs, but the way that you can place this car, so incredibly crisp. And you have that stability from the long wheelbase, the wide track. Since the flywheel has been lightened a substantial amount, you need to wait a little bit when you upshift. It's amazing at downshifting, incredibly responsive, but it's easy for the revs to hang, you hear. And you have to either be amazing at changing the gears, and you have to learn how to drive this, or just have some more, you have to wait a little bit. As long as you just tune in on what makes a car good. You don't need four-wheel drive, 400 plus horsepower. Just need a perfectly set up car. And you're done. And you have the Honda Civic Type R. I have to talk about the competition, because Toyota just launched, and I've tested the new Toyota GR Yaris. And that is a serious piece of kit. 280 horsepower, selectable, four-wheel drive, tight, homologated, unique in every single way. And of course you have the 400 horsepower plus monsters such as the Mercedes A45S and the 5-cylinder Audi RS3. But which car is the best hot hatch? Well, it is so easy to go into outright performance, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, because that is easy to measure. The uncrowned king has in many ways, and for many reviewers, always been the Honda Civic Type R. And the question has always been, can they retain that placement as well? Will they be able to top the car that predecedes the new car? In a four-wheel drive car, you can mask behaviors that you don't want by tuning diffs and stuff like that. A front-wheel drive car needs to be tuned and engineered really well to not fall face first. And the new Honda Civic Type R does not do that in any ways. On the opposite, it is competing on a level that you have to pay so much more. On the exterior, it is definitely more laid back, more restrained, more mature, but driving it is definitely more of everything. More feedback, more hardcore. When cars are getting more complicated, heavier, hybrid systems, more power, more of everything, the currency of driving enjoyment, of simplicity, has become a real factor in today's automotive world. And Honda, with their little Honda Civic Type R, brings all of that and has always done it. It has been the benchmark in the hot hatch segment, but nowadays I think it's a benchmark for the whole automotive sector.